Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, we've got the Petro-Yuan, which is looking like it's going to be a big competitor with the Petro-Dollar. We're also going to take a look at North Korea and the possibility of its nuclear program and what they're, in the works or talks about in regards to that. But first, we're going to take a look at the energy consumption and a particular day that was actually created to take a look at some ways in which we can kind of curb our dependence on energy. In October of 2015, the 22nd day, marked World Energy Day, a day when we take into account the world's dependency on energy and actions that can be taken to curb that dependency. Let's take a look at this next video concerning the day, its origination and purpose.
October 22, 2015 marks World Energy Day, when we observe the need to take environmental action in the face of energy dependence. This holiday originated at the 2012 World Energy Forum, intended to address the future of oil and sustainability. Although peak oil usage was supposed to have occurred in the 1970s, today production and use is as high as ever. Almost all of the world's oil is located in vast reservoirs, centralized in a number of countries. However, whether that oil can actually be extracted is referred to as proven or unproven. Proven reserves simply means that there is a 90% chance of the oil being extracted, and we know it's there. Unproven generally means that we believe it's there, but for a number of reasons can't extract it with certainty. Generally, oil estimates focus on proven reserves. Well, as of 2014, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries reports that roughly 1.5 trillion barrels of proven reserves are still available. For comparison, some have estimated that 1 trillion barrels have been used since commercial oil drilling began in 1870, although other estimates vary wildly. And while a century and a half seems like a pretty long time, oil use has been rapidly increasing. Today, the world consumes about 34 billion barrels a year, with China expected to account for half that usage within the next 5 years. But China only holds about 32 billion barrels itself. Roughly 80% of the world's oil comes from the 12 members of OPEC, with roughly 2/3 of the oil located in the Middle East. However, the single largest reserve on the Earth is nowhere near most of the other OPEC countries. 20% of the world's oil is located in Venezuela, South America. 20% of the world's oil is located in Venezuela, South America. They reportedly hold almost 300 billion barrels. Saudi Arabia comes in close with about 265 billion barrels. The third highest reserves, though, are found in Canada, which is a non-OPEC nation. In fact, of the 285 billion barrels held outside of OPEC countries, more than 60% is in Canada.
Well, it certainly shows how dependent everyone is on oil.
That's right.
Well, the world's dependency on energy isn't the only concern that we're facing. In the South American country of Venezuela, the poverty is getting so severe that parents are intentionally leaving their children at orphanages because they don't have enough food to feed them. Now, couple that with ongoing protests, riots, and civil unrest, and you have a crisis situation where the basic needs of its citizens are not being met.
Pushing the people to the edge. Vanessa Newman, author of the book Blood Prophets, interviewed with Fox News regarding the situation in Venezuela. She said that the country is collapsing and that she saw the border crossing that is in dispute right now, where hundreds of Venezuelan refugees were crossing in order to find a better life. It's so bad that people are killing each other for food. She also said that governments were deploying soldiers armed with 50 caliber rifles in order to control the crossing. And in neighboring countries where Venezuelans are crossing the border, the locals are actually beating up homeless Venezuelan refugees because they say there's just so many of them.
Well, the neighboring nations are so stressed that even Colombia has made it illegal for any of the bordering towns to feed any of the hungry Venezuelans. Now, many are wondering what is going to occur as the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, estimates that hyperinflation is going to reach 13.5%, coupled with the fact that people don't have any cash available, making the situation even more desperate.
Oh, boy. The situation has forced many Venezuelans to join terrorist groups because they get food and clothing. Those increased numbers have led to several of the recent attacks in Colombia. Ms. Newman said that the Colombians won't take this sitting down, as they'll cross the border and then they'll have military assistance from the United States. She said this, of course, would lead to more uprisings from within the country itself.
Ms. Newman concluded saying, right now people are selling gas, hair, even their bodies for food. This doesn't last much longer. She said the people of Venezuela are even begging for the Americans to liberate them because they are so desperate. And really, as we just saw in the previous video, how rich that country is with oil, but yet their people are suffering so greatly. It doesn't seem to make sense.
Right, and there's been a little bit of tension in times past with the president of both the Venezuela and the United States, where there's been some harsh words back and forth. Of course, Venezuela does have those great resources. The United States does not have access to them. And of course, through Colombia, they could actually get into the country. But we're going to see, because the Venezuelans were not much for the United States, but now they're in such a desperate situation that they're actually looking for them to kind of liberate them from their current suffering. Well, in other news, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman met with the Archbishop of Canterbury in London as he makes his journey meeting with different leaders around the world to strengthen ties. This meeting follows a visit with the Coptic Pope Tawardos II in Cairo, Egypt. During his meeting, he made a strong commitment to interfaith dialogue.
Well, North Korea is once again in the news this week, showing some action there with their nuclear reactors. Now, Larry McGee, our field correspondent, has been covering this story. Larry, what exactly is North Korea doing that they are being noticed by the international community as starting up on their nuclear program once again?
The feistiness of the North still remains unquenched, despite threats and other measures of aggression coming from the U.S. There are recent reports of the DPRK firing up one of its main nuclear reactors following years of construction. The suspicions are a result of satellite imagery, which is alleged to show emissions coming from the North Korean nuclear complex, which is consistent with nuclear activity. The official response of Pyongyang is that the plant in question was built to provide electricity for civilian use, but intelligence officials said it's impossible to confirm those assertions without international inspections. The allegations are believed to pose a serious concern for the upcoming Trump-Kim talks, where it is suspected that the new activity will be the chief topic of discussion. There is much talk going now regarding yet another shakeup in the current administration. President Trump announced via Twitter that General H.R. McMaster will be replaced by John Bolton as National Security Advisor. The president offered the traditional courtesies and stating that Mr. McMaster had done an outstanding job and will always be his friend. In trying to assess the incoming advisor, however, and what can be expected from him, analysts note that Mr. Bolton is in opposition to the Iranian nuclear deal, believes that the DPRK is untrustworthy, and is always up for a fight with Moscow. Observers see the appointment as yet another contradiction on behalf of the president, however, who argued at one point for a reduction in useless wars. The outgoing advisor, Mr. McMaster, was against the idea of a meeting between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. But with his departure, it is believed that the meeting has increased in probability, and provided that it does occur, it is thought that the president will probably enter with a lot of non-negotiable positions that will rob the meeting of any real progress. In addition, there are questions with regard to the true intentions of the U.S. in Syria, which President Trump has stated is to defeat ISIS, but others say is to create a garrison in the Middle East to combat Iran. The conquest of Iran is said to be Mr. Bolton's obsession, and so analysts see our policy in Syria being arranged even more so to facilitate whatever America's next move will be in Tehran. During the height of the Ukrainian crisis, incoming advisor Bolton was also pushing for immediate entrance of the Ukraine into NATO, so it is suspected that the U.S. policy in that region will become more confrontational as well, making for an all-around more hostile relationship with Russia. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Well, Katan, as the already strained relationship with Russia and the U.S., now with John Bolton being in there, it seems even worse because he's more for the war than it seems like his predecessor. So we'll have to see how far he takes it.
Yeah, when people are in positions of power to make those types of calls, it's usually not long before we see some activity of war on the field. Well, there's a new oil trader in town, and it's leaving the petrodollar feeling a little anxious. This week, history was made when China launched its yuan-backed oil futures. Currently, China is the world's largest importer of oil, and up until now has had to pay for that oil in American dollars.
But the newly launched Shanghai Oil Exchange will allow China and other countries to bypass the standard petrodollar. Now, it couldn't have come at a better time for China. This week, U.S. President Donald Trump announced his tariff plan, which will cost China billions of dollars on its exports to the United States.
Interesting. Well, Mamdouh Salameh, an international oil economist, says in the big picture of things, the Petro-Yuan could drastically change the world economy over the long run. In an interview with RT, he said the reason for this is, quote, because by definition, the Petro-Yuan is challenging the dominance of the petrodollar. And in doing that, it will impact adversely on the petrodollar and, of course, by definition, on the American economy itself. Since so much is traded in the petrodollar, that money comes back into the United States.
Right. Mr. Salameh says that the petrodollar is challenged by the yuan being established as an international currency that other countries can now use to buy oil in. While he admits it will take time for the petro-yuan to rise in popularity, he said, quote, it certainly poses a real challenge to the petrodollar for the first time since 1973 when the petrodollar was launched.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, China imports more oil than any country, purchasing about 9 million barrels daily. Now it wants to use its own currency to price the world's most traded commodity. Along with the new petrocurrency comes the goal of reaching benchmark status like world trading companies Brent and WTI crude, which are both priced in dollars. But Shanghai traded oil has a ways to go, to reach that benchmark status. But those trading the petrodollar in that should be watchful of their new rival. You know, when you're the big man on campus for a long period of time, you don't really like to see that competition come up because it could, kind of squash your dominance over the market. And I think that's what the petrodollar is fearing, because once China comes on the scene with the yuan, it's going to kind of take away some of the market share for the dollar.
Absolutely. And a lot of countries are willing to deal with China.
Yes, that's correct.
In that. Mm-hmm. Well, our next two articles have to deal with the Catholic Church. First one here, we'd like to show you a video during a visit to a Catholic monastery in northwestern Russia. President Vladimir Putin was taken by surprise while shaking hands with some lay people and clergy. Now, one priest bent down and kissed the Russian president's hand. Let's take a look at how President Vladimir Putin responded.
Well, you can definitely tell the Russian president was not comfortable with that gesture. Probably the way I would have responded. Well, for decades now, the problem of pedophilia in the church has been one that some thought was taken care of, or was it? Catholic priests who have been accused of sexually molesting boys and girls in churches and orphanages are not dealt with in the way the average citizen would be by regular courts of law.
It's a multinational of a particular kind, one you all know. It's present across the globe and on the corner of your street. The Catholic Church. and its very darkest secret: pedophilia. We discovered that clergymen found guilty of pedophilia are still active, often in contact with children. Thanks to internal documents, we'll reveal how church leaders protect priests accused of sexually abusing minors by sending them from country to country. Our investigation into these international exiles took us to Cameroon, to Argentina, to the United States, to France, and to Italy. During our travels, we established this unprecedented map that regarding the transfers of priests involved in cases of pedophilia.
Il y a quand même cette idée que quelqu'un qui a été un prédateur pour des enfants, ben finalement, s'il va en Afrique ou s'il va en Amérique latine, c'est pas bien grave, c'est criminel.
The Catholic Church itself decides what will be done with them, and oftentimes they are just moved to new dioceses. And this is what a lot of people have had problems with, knowing that they have just relocated those priests, and often in different countries, as the one investigation reported there, but that they're not effectively dealing with them. They're just relocating them to where in that new location they can do the same thing. And you know, the thing with this is, here is a organization, the Catholic Church here, boasting how many billions of followers, saying that, you know, they're supposed to be an organization teaching righteousness and a way of holiness, but yet this is openly shown in their organization that the gay clergy and the pedophilia is a widespread problem that they allow to go on.
Yeah, and you see this same mindset that you see in how the Roman Catholic Church deals with problems with the nation's leaders, putting a Band-Aid on the problem instead of getting to the source of the problem and fixing it and actually really trying to find a peaceful solution. So you can see a connection between, of course, the Roman Catholic Church and the world leaders, that they're all kind of following that same pattern, which eventually is going to, as we've seen with North Korea and the tensions between the United States and Russia, Iran, Syria, is going to lead to an all-out nuclear war.
Right. And getting to the source of the problem is exactly what needs to be done if we're ever going to have a peaceful solution. Well, if you'd like to find more about these stories, please contact the House of Yahweh and request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. Here's how you can do that.
You can contact the House of Yahweh by writing them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can also call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites by going to yahweh.com, yeshuahawkins.com, or yahwehsbranch.com. You can also visit our website by going to YPNnews.com. And to email the House of Yahweh, you can write them at info@yahweh.com. For all calls outside the United States, please dial the number on your screen. And of course, don't forget the best resource to studying your Holy Scriptures that is also free on the internet, the Yisrael Says and the Ask Yisrael program. And you can find those two free programs online by going to YisraelSays.com and AskYisrael.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next is the man who has the answers for the problems we see in today's world, Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.